Hi, this is Joe Bolen, and today we're going to learn about the ErrorProvider component that we can put into a Windows form to make it easier for the user to see errors as they're processing their data and quickly respond to those errors instead of using the message box. I'll show both methods so you can see the difference, and you'll find out that the ErrorProvider is a very nice tool to add to our validation of data being processed. So let's take a look at the program we'll work with and see how we use the ErrorProvider. I have up on the screen running right now the very simple calculator that we first introduced back in lesson 11 when we talked about designing a program. And if you have not created the very simple calculator, I'll provide code later on in the series where you can find that code. Also, you might be able to quickly stop the video at any point in time and take a look at the code and code it in yourself. But this is our very simple calculator running at this moment, and I'm going to show you that we can type in TEN for a number and maybe TWO for our second number and hit the addition, and it will not error up, but it won't give us the right answer. It'll give us the value to 0 on it. And the other thing is, if I change the value, let's say I change it to 10, the result value has not changed, and I don't know if I've processed things correctly. And I'll even change this to 2, and still the value down here still shows 0. And I want to clear this out first before I go any further, so that this will be clear, letting me know and the user know that we have to click one of these buttons to update the result value label field. So there it is being updated at this point. So let's go in and look at addressing the fix to clearing out this particular one. Okay, let's go to the code and we'll learn a little bit how this processes. We basically have first number text box and second number text box, and then we have our result value label for our output that we're going to have of the process when we have one of these buttons clicked. So let's take a look at one way we can do this. There is what's called, for a text box, the text change event, which is the default event for a text box. In this case, like the button click event is the default for the button. And as we created the click events by clicking on the buttons, we can also do that for the text box by just quickly double clicking on the text box, and it will create for us, as you see, a first number text box change event on that. And so this is the name of the procedure, but this is the actual event that causes this procedure to be executed. So we could change this name up here, and I might want to change this to simply clear result, like that, and that would be a different name, but the same event would run this procedure. That's one method to do that, but I'd like to show you another way to do that. So I'm going to highlight this code and delete it. Let's go back to our form, and this time what I'm going to do is take this, and I've highlighted once again the first number text box, and I'm going to go over and highlight the event button for that property, the first number text box, and you'll see that the text change event is the default event for this, but I can give it another name. And in this case, I'm going to call it clear result. And then I'm going to hit the enter key, and it'll create our code as well for us to do that. So that's a nice way to remember. We can have our own unique name. It doesn't have to be first number text box for our procedure name. We can give it our own name, or we can rename it by highlighting and renaming it here. So that takes care of that. Now, one of the other things is we want to change and run the clear result procedure not only for the first number text box text change event, but also for the second number text box text change event. And we can use the same procedure for both of them. So I can just come down to the end where I have the last event, and I'm going to hit a comma and enter in second number text box, and I'm going to hit the text change event for it. So both those events, the first number or the second number text box, will cause the clear result procedure to be executed. And I'll format this by hitting the enter here and tabbing over and cleaning it up so it looks clean, easy to read. And what we want to have happen when this occurs is we want to go to the result value label, go to its text property, and we want to make it a null, or not a null string, but an empty string. So I'm going to use, instead of double quotes, I'm going to use string empty. And that'll take care of clearing that out when we run it. So let's see this part work first. I also want to document my procedure up above and say clear result value label when either first or second text box value changes. So I've documented what this will do in case I forget it later on and want to come back in and quickly review why I'm doing this. Let's now run this code and see the difference. Okay, I've got the code running, and I'll bring the text box up for you to see. And this time I'll enter in a value 10, and we'll put 2 in, and I'll hit the plus. We get our result. Now I'll do a change on 10. Let's make it 20. And as soon as I started to change the value, the result area cleared out for this particular activity, and we know we're going to have to hit the buttons to get an update of the result field, which I'll do. Let me also change the second one here, and so we'll see the second text box changing. I'll make it 3, and once again it changed, and then I'll hit the button. So anytime one of these values, either the first number text box or the second number text box changes, we're going to clear out the result field, which is a good thing to do when we're running any kind of form where the data might change. We want to update the user's display to represent that it hasn't been updated yet. Okay, that's being done. Now let's take a look at how to validate this so that if I enter in TEN, I don't get an invalid result. In this case, 10 is not validated. It defaults to 0, and I get 0 plus 3. Well, I want to make certain that if I enter in TEN or something else that's not a number, that I inform the user that I've got a problem. So let's do that. It's called validation. So let's go back to our code, and I'm going to go back to the form itself on this particular one, and we'll review very quickly the procedure that takes place. I'm going to look only at the add button in this case because the other buttons are very similar. We came into our code, we declared our variables, first number and second number, as double numeric data types, and also declared our result field, in this case sum, as a double numeric data type as well. Then we came in and we wanted to parse the information that we entered in the case of first number text box. If the data was in fact like 10 for 10, it would parse into the first number field and give us a 10 for that first number. But if I had typed in TEN, this field would not be updated and would remain with the value of 0 that it was initially declared as. So we want to modify this area in our code with some validation of the data being entered in, and inform the user that they have entered in incorrect data and have them change it before we proceed any further. And that way, not only will we bypass not having any errors, we'll have good data to process. Now, let's begin by looking at this particular line of code. And we learned from our last lesson on the try parse that not only will it parse our data for us and return if it can, a valid numeric data type for in this case, the double try parse, we can also test for it whether it succeeded in that parsing, and so we can code in front of it if not. So I'm going to code if not, and if it was not able to parse it, this line of code will run. If not, then, and we'll see an indef in here. And in this process, I want to inform the user we've got a problem. So I'm going to say, I'm going to use the message box, and I'm going to use the show method of the message box, and then the message that I'm going to give the user is enter only a numeric value. And I also am going to provide as my second parameter into the method the title or caption area of the message box, input error. And for the third parameter, I'm going to enter in the message box OK. And get my cursor back. Message box OK. And for the fourth parameter, I'm going to use the message box icon error on that. So there is my message box, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit so it's easier to read. Okay, so I'm going to display the message box with enter only a numeric value, and the caption will say input error, and I'll have the message box button OK, and the icon will be the error icon. Then after the user has replied to the error message, I want to place my cursor, in the first text box and highlight the data. Okay, and to do that, we use the first number text box, and we use the focus method to get our cursor there. And then we also use the first number text box, and we select all the data there by using select all as our method. Now, we've come through at this point. We've informed the user that we have a message that we want to address. We also have placed our cursor in the back end of the first number text box for them to change things. But at this point, we don't want to follow through on down because, in fact, we have bad data. We want to stop this procedure. And what we do is an early exit of this procedure by doing exit sub. Okay, so as we'll go through, we'll test just the first number text box to see if this works, and if it does, we'll then add it to our other code. So let's do a start, and I have my code running here, and I'll make it a little bit bigger for you to see. Okay, I'll enter in a valid value first and hit the plus sign or process. Now I'm going to hit an invalid value for our first number, TEN, tab out, and then I'm going to hit the plus sign now. And I get a message that is popped up with our caption input error, enter only numeric value, and our error icon, and our OK button. So I've informed the user that there is an error with that first number text box. The user then will hit OK, and our cursor should then go back into the first number text box, highlight it so that we can change that. which it did, and of course we'll change it back to 10 and process it and it'll work fine. So let's do that also now for the second number text box. Let's go back into our code. We're going to basically do exactly the same thing here on that, and we're going to say if not, and we'll code it then at the end of this. We'll use the same information above, and I'm going to grab this code right here very quickly with a copy, and I'm going to come down to this line and paste it. The only difference is I'm going to use the second number text box, so I'll take first and change it to second. Okay, change our information here to say second on that. Okay, let's check, and then we want to make certain that we've got everything correct on that. And so we'll come through, give a message here as well. And I'm going to come up to the very beginning and say validate now, because that's what we're doing. And converting with the message box. So I've changed our documentation a little bit, and we've got this set. Now let's run this, test this code. Okay, I've got it running, and let me make it a little bit bigger for you to see. There we go. And what we're going to do is enter in TEN and 2, try to process the addition, and I get a message back saying enter only numeric value. Change this to 10, try it again. I get the same message for this, and I'm going to hit OK, and it takes me to the second one to change it and process it. So we've got that corrected at this point in time. Now we need to go back into our code and add those changes also for the rest of these buttons. But now let's, before we do that, let's improve upon this by using the ErrorProvider. So let's introduce the ErrorProvider to our code. We see that we can use this method, but the problem with using the message box is that I have to have the user click on the button and go to that spot afterwards to change the information. We can use the same logic but use the ErrorProvider, making it a little bit easier, and I'll show you what we get with the ErrorProvider. So let's go back to the form itself, and I'm going to bring up the toolbox and pin it so you can see it there. And what I'm going to do is go to the components area of the toolbox and bring in the ErrorProvider. And so what we do is we just highlight it with our mouse, drag it over to our form and drop it. And we can drop it anywhere because it will not go on the form, but will go into what's called the component tray below the form. And there's the component tray with our ErrorProvider. At this point we come over and highlight the ErrorProvider itself on this, and we can see about it and learn about how to use that. It has different properties that we can use with the ErrorProvider, and we'll look at those in just a moment. Let me go back to full screen. Go to the properties window, not the event window, but the properties window, and we'll see that the ErrorProvider has a blink rate default and the style, and it's right now on the main form as its container, and we see other parameters here that we can change. Normally this is probably fine for our usage, and we do not need to rename it since we're only going to need one ErrorProvider for this form. So now let's do the coding that goes behind the ErrorProvider. So let's go back to our code. For our code for the ErrorProvider, you'll see it's very similar on that. What we want to do this time is go into our code and say, okay, we don't have correct data here, so we want to turn on the ErrorProvider, And we do that by typing in the same kind of information. I'm going to use ErrorProvider, and what we want to do is use the set error method, and the set error method then takes the following parameters. In this case, for us, we're going to pass in the control that we used, which is first number text box. That's our control that we're wanting to set the error for. And then the second parameter is actually the error that we're going to enter in. And in this case, we're going to say enter only a numeric value. On that, there's our error message, and that's all we need to do at this point. Now let me go back to our code on that. I'll get rid of the message box show part and replace it with the ErrorProvider. And what I want to also do, though, is a little bit different. Instead of running this particular procedure here, I'm actually going to switch this a little bit. I'm going to take out the not, and right after the not on this particular one, I want to clear out the message. So in this case, we can say if double try parse, then I'm going to use the same ErrorProvider, set error, and I'm going to put in also first number text box. But the difference is I'm going to use string empty for the message, and you'll see I have else here. Okay, now as we're coming in, we want to do this. We want to clear out the message if it does parse correctly. So that's why I changed the logic from if not to if. I want to clear out the message with the string empty. Then I want to set the message if I have an error to give the message, and then to process out like we did for the message box show. So let's look just only at the first text box to see how this works. Let me run it. Okay, I'm going to enter in just 10 first to show you it will process. I'll put 2 here and process it. Now I'll put in TEN and try to process it. And there is our ErrorProvider. It showed up, and I also have the ability to bring my mouse over the icon, and it will tell me what the error is. So the error message shows up, and I get a nice message on that. So let's do that for our second number as well. So I'm going to go back to our code, and we'll do the same logic. I'll take out the not here. I'm going to basically take our code that we have here, and I'm going to put it here. But the difference is this is going to be second number text box. We're going to clear it out if I come in there. Otherwise, I'm going to use the same message. So I'll just highlight this one, bring it down here and replace this one. And I also want to change the control that it's addressing. Okay, and everything else stays the same on that. So now let's run this. We'll double check that we've got the second number working correctly. And this time I'll put in a valid number for the first one. And the second one I'll type in the word to, instead of the number 2, and I get the nice message there. So let's type in 10 above, and we'll see that when I hit this, both of them will show up wrong. They'll flash first, and we can turn that off if we don't want it to blink by setting the properties of the ErrorProvider itself. But blinking will help the user see that there's an error. The little icon will show up, and our message box information will be there for the user to see. So quickly the user will get a feedback that there's an error. The cursor will then relocate to the particular box that has the error, and we can change that. Let's see, I changed that particular one. It then knows to go to the second one. I change that one, and it processes fine, and the icons go away. So the ErrorProvider is pretty nice to use. Okay, let's finish up this code though. We have the rest of these buttons to deal with as well. So let's quickly go back to our code and take a look at what we need to do. Well, as I said, all of these are doing the exact same thing here. We got the same boxes, the same numbers being processed, and we have that also for all the buttons down below. So we can come up quickly and grab this whole section in our addition block, hit my Control-C to copy, or I can use my mouse and do that. Then I come back and I'm going to replace this whole part out of here. Control-V to paste it in. I'm going to come down to the next one. Come down to the next one, which is our processing of our product. Okay, there we go. I want to take this part, Control-V there, and make certain I've got everything done. Okay, now one last thing, and I'll show you what we'll need to do. Not only do we need to do it for the particular events of the box, but if I want to just clear out everything, as I did in the clear button, I want to also clear the ErrorProvider. And the ErrorProvider has a special method we can use here. And what I'm going to do is document clear ErrorProvider. And we just go type in ErrorProvider, and we hit the clear method, and that clear method will clear out any errors. So if I have 2 different errors or even one, once I come in here and I'm clearing out the other text boxes, I want to also clear out the ErrorProvider. So let's run this now. Okay, I'm going to type in TEN, and I'll type in TWO, and I'll hit the addition. I've got an error on the first one. I can change that, fix it, get it, and it'll go to the second one and fix that and process it. Now we can want to check that for our other ones, which they should work. And I'll type in 10 here again, check that. And we'll assume right now I've got them for the other buttons. But let's say I decide that really I don't want these values at all. We can hit the clear, and this should clear out as well. So with the ErrorProvider clear method, .clear, we can clean out the ErrorProvider and get rid of this message. And there it goes away. So we want to always code also the option to clear out everything without going into processing the text box itself. So we had these 4 buttons operating very much the same in terms of the same text boxes were being used, and we were doing the same kind of validation for those text boxes in all these cases, and we could use the ErrorProvider there, and then of course we want to use the clear method for clearing out everything to get it back to its initial state. So we've got our program pretty much done. Pretty much on that. In fact, we do have a little bit more to code, and I want to give you a heads up on that. We're going to look at our next lesson on validating alone, and we'll add actually in something totally different. We'll still use the ErrorProvider, but we're going to do it in a much different way, and we'll find out that we only need to have a couple of extra procedures added to our code, and we don't have to keep repeating on all those buttons the validation that we just did with this lesson. So we saw in this lesson we used the message box to send a message, but the user then had to come up and click the OK button, which meant that they had to take their hand off the keyboard, go to the mouse, and click on it. Then put their hands back on the keyboard. With the ErrorProvider, it quickly showed on the form there was an error, and only if the user didn't have an idea what they might have done wrong, they can then bring their mouse over to the icon, and the icon then would give them the message what was wrong. And so they don't have to spend as much time, they don't have to go necessarily to the mouse to process the information, because we've kicked up the ErrorProvider, which will turn on the icon for that particular field. So I hope you'll take advantage of using the ErrorProvider. It makes your code much more professional than using just the message box. That doesn't say, though, that we should give up using the message box. It's still valid for a lot of things, some of which we cannot provide ahead of time the kind of message that needs to be addressed. We'll talk about that later as well. But for now, learn about using the message box and the ErrorProvider to make your code better. You want to validate your data, making certain that no garbage comes into your program, because you do not want to process garbage. As the adage goes, garbage in, garbage out. So we want to protect things, make certain we don't get any errors, and give the user information before things are processed if there is an error, so that they can be caught and then changed by the user and fixed to process on through. So until next time, get your hands dirty in that code, try things out, and take care.